Hey, everybody, this is Brett, and Merry Christmas. I hope everybody is doing well out there. This morning, I checked out a post that I wrote a few days ago, and I was like, I want to share that with everybody because some of you can really relate to it, and others are going to be really jealous. And it depends on how old you are. Because, like, if you grew up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, like I did, then you had a big advantage in a certain regard. And I'm talking about music. And the reason that the music was so incredible at that time is because largely what you can do is you can compare it to nowadays. And nowadays we have all of these things like specifically computers and phones, which is a small computer, and gadgets, etc. And people spend a lot of time using those. But back then they didn't have those. And so people spent, especially, musicians spent a lot more time playing their instruments. And the key thing largely with that is that time makes you really, really good. And people like Prince that were like magnificent at playing so many different instruments, you don't see that now anymore. And so I'm going to read to you this little post that I wrote. It says, "Why music is very important to me. When I was a kid in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, music was my best friend. I've always been attracted to excellence, and somehow I just knew how good music was at that time. And the music was consistently amazing when my parents were not. It's not that they weren't sometimes good parents, but definitely not consistent. So later, when grunge, heavy metal, and rap came out, I gagged. When that all started coming out, I was like, oh my God, what's happening to the music? What the hell is going on with the music? And of course, more great music came out later, but for the most part, the amazing music that I came to love lasted from about 1965, which was actually the year I was born. And in 65, the album Rubber Soul from the Beatles came out. The previous Beatles albums had some, like, it was like bebop-y, that like 50s bebop-y music. It didn't have that new. It's when the Beatles started to evolve, if you will. They started to think in different terms. They started to get really creative. And it was largely kind of driven from the Vietnam War and people being really angry, and so they were starting to create their lash back at society and music, which, it creates incredible art, in all honesty. So where was I? So 65 Beatles Rubber Soul until 20 years later, 85. And I'm talking about I'm talking about these bands. Now just try and absorb this, okay? The Beatles, Led Zeppelin, the Moody Blues, Elton John, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, John Denver, my favorite, Boston, Bread, Willie Nelson, Billy Joel, Diana Ross and the Supremes, America, Prince, the Eagles, Allman Brothers, Journey, The Police, Sting, Pink Floyd, Fleetwood Mac, Paul McCartney and Wings, Jackson Browne, Styx, Rush, John Lennon, Leonard Skinner, Bob Dylan, I'm Not Near Done, Bob Marley, The Byrds, Clapton, Smokey Robinson, Gordon Lightfoot, George Harrison, Grand Funk Railroad, James Taylor, Jimi Hendrix, Joni Mitchell, Marshall Tucker, Peter Frampton, the Spinners, and then this doesn't even include all the good disco bands. Seals and Crofts, Glenn Campbell, and many, many others. And I forgot Neil Young. I didn't even say Neil Young. I mean, and I'm sure that there's a whole lot more. You guys could write down in the comments below. So real music is real music. It's created by real people. And the reason I say that is because there's so much music that's, and I'm not against electronic music because it can be cool, but it's kind of, a lot of it is just that's all it is. And there are no imperfections. See, there's no imperfections in electronic music. It's always exactly perfect. It's the imperfections that make stuff cool. You know, if it's ridiculously imperfect, then it's not cool. But when somebody makes a little mistake and then they laugh about it, that's especially cool. So I live in the Appalachian Mountains where people really understand real music, and that's kind of largely the time thing. When you live up here, people just tend to have like some time on their hands to sit around and play music. And so it's like they get really good. And Dolly Parton and her huge family grew up in these mountains. She had 11 brothers and sisters. And that's what they would do. They would sit around and play, you know. They would play jugs and spoons and fiddles, etc. But music is one of the consistent things that I have in common with the hillbilly folk of this region. And I stopped at there's this little art place where they used to get together before COVID. They used to get together on Sunday mornings, and I'd never been to this before, this gathering on Saturday mornings. And I walked up there, and there were a few people that had recognized me from the open mic, and they know I like to sing, you know. And so I sat down and waited until the song was over, what they were playing, and I sang a song. I can't remember what it was. When it was my turn, you go around in a circle, and everybody gets to play something. For me, in my case, I got to sing a song, and it was like I was a member of the group. So if you can play an instrument here, then you'll be welcomed. You'll be welcomed with open arms. Or if you can sing or do something. So yeah, then I put a video of John Denver, Annie's song. Let's me check that. Five people are watching. So am I coming in loud and clear? I imagine I am, now that I'm using the right browser. But I want to thank everybody for joining me this morning. Have a Merry Christmas. I hope you enjoy my little post that I wrote. Be well.